Okay, we are online. It is July 22nd, 2025. This is the Town Board of the Town of Estes Park. In its regular board meeting, anyone who would like to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with us may do so. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business, we have a proclamation, and rather than doing it from the dais, or as the British say, dais, because that's the way it's spelled, it's kind of like Brett Favre, it's like, come on, get the consonants and vowels in the right order. I'm going to speak from down here, after which I will invite one of the members of the Recycles Committee up to accept the proclamation. That'll give us a chance for a photo op. Come on. Okay. Do you hear that? Okay. Well, I can do it without this too. Whereas Estes Recycles Day provides Estes Valley locals an opportunity to recycle electronics, which by law may not be deposited into landfills or single-stream recycling bins in Colorado. And whereas it is essential for security purposes to shred papers containing personal and financial information before recycling them. And whereas the 2025 Estes Recycles Day collection includes compact fluorescent light, CFL, bulbs, bicycle tires and tubes, and smoke detectors to further extend recycling opportunities for our residents and businesses. And whereas recycling metal objects, including hardware, broken tools, leaky pails, appliances, microwaves, and other items which are at least 50% metal, reduces the need to mine new metal. And whereas donations from the premier members credit union, the Estes Valley Sunrise Rotary Club, the town of Estes Park, and the village thrift shop offset the cost of recycling again this year. And whereas to improve sustainability, promote good disposal habits, and establish a circular economy, the League of Women Voters Community Recycling Committee, the Rotary Club of Estes, and the town of Estes Park have organized this multi-purpose recycling activity on August 8th, 2025. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and the trustees of the town of Estes Park do hereby proclaim August 8th, 2025, Estes Recycles Day, and enthusiastically call upon the citizens of Estes Park to bring their hard-to-recycle disposables and join everyone else at the town of Estes Park Event Center parking lot to celebrate Estes Recycles Day by recycling. I would like to invite Mary Sampson up to accept the proclamation and say a few words. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if we can get this.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall.
I will.
The Community Recycling Committee and all of the League of Women Voters would also like to thank the town of Estes Park for your generous grant of $3,632 to Estes Recycles Day 2025. We'd also like to thank you for the continued support of the Event Center team and for letting us use the parking lot at the Event Center for free. You guys have been very instrumental in our successes the last few years, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, here, you're probably going to take this.
Oh, yeah.
That was the actual photo. Oh, a picture of the actual proclamation being handed over. So, here you go.
Thank you, Mary.
All right, agenda approval. Are there any changes or additions, trustees, to the agenda as written? Seeing none, I'll take a motion
I'll move for approval.
in a second.
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Sinak made the motion to approve the agenda as written. Trustee Youngland seconded. If there are no other comments, we can go to a vote. Town clerk. And the agenda is approved as written. We will now open up for public comment on items not on the agenda. Any public comments on quasi-judicial items must be reserved for the appropriate public hearing. I see a hand up, and therefore you may come down items not on the agenda, and we'll ask for name, address, and a 3 minutes.
All right. Melissa Woods, 1601 High Drive. The good news is I have less to say today, but I hope it's more impactful than my last statements to you. I'm here tonight because I have some questions for all of you, with the exception of Trustee Eigel. I am also here because I expect elected officials to be held accountable for their actions. At the trustee meeting on March 11th, Dana Klein, the parking and transit manager, reported to the trustees that there were no recommended changes to the paid parking program for Estes Park because the TAB committee hadn't expressly supported continuation of the paid parking program in writing because they hadn't been asked to. Trustee Eigel implied falsely that that meant that they were opposed to it. TAB subsequently approved the current parking program at their April meeting. Okay. Why was that false misrepresentation okay with you? I know you're not going to answer me right now, but I'm asking you, why was that okay with you? Why was that ignored? Then, within days of the March 11th trustee meeting, Mark Eigel sent an email to Belle Morris, the chair of TAB, and she replied to him. He then requested that they meet with Mayor Hall. At that meeting, Mark Eigel threatened Belle by saying, "I will come after you and bring you down very publicly." So, I asked Mayor Hall, why was that okay with you? I don't think it was, but why didn't something happen? Trustees, knowing that, why is that okay with you? The Town Board Code of Conduct operating principle states in section 4-2-1, conduct in public meetings, quote, trustees will not make comments that are belligerent, personal attacks, impertinent, slanderous, threatening, abusive, or disparaging. I will come after you and I will take you down very publicly. I'm not saying that to you guys, but that is what was said. Section 4-3-1, conduct in private communications of the Town Board Code of Conduct states that the same level of respect and consideration of differing points of view that is deemed appropriate for public discussions should be maintained in private discussions. So you might say that the meeting with the mayor and Belle and Trustee Eigel was a private meeting, but the rules still applied. Trustee Eigel clearly threatened Belle Morris, and he followed through with that threat with the help of all of you, with the exception of Trustees Hazelton and Lancaster. The rest of you helped him do that. Okay, so he has violated the Town Board of Conduct. And why is that okay? Why have you done nothing? We expect more from you. And those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments for items not on the agenda?
Hello, I'm John Guffey. I live at 561 Chapin Lane here in town, and I'm just here to briefly describe a vision for our community, and which includes developing a pathway to people being heard and decisions being made in concert, organized with the whole community participating at their desire, at their wish. the process I wanted to say is simply consensus building, and it hasn't been a real theme in this country as to how to make decisions. People rise to power and they believe that they have been given authority, which is a very blank check that hasn't been issued. And we start in our community, close to home, right here. Estes Park has huge decisions that are made in the best interest of all of us. The Lakota have a word, mitako yasin, which means all our relations, all my relatives, all of us, not just people, but the whole ecosystem of which we live upon. And it can't be disregarded that electing a representative is not the same as making decisions as a community. And I would like to see response over time and the development of an ability to listen and be heard and share in decision making, as opposed to executive authority. It's just a thought. Thank you.
Other comments for items not? Thank you. Had my timer in the way. We'll move forward on town board comments and liaison reports. Trustee Eigel.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Trustee Lancaster.
No report.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sinek.
Quick report. Rodeo went very well. We'll have a summary coming soon. I did want to, before the recycling committee kind of left, which was a little late, I wanted to mention that one of the things I enjoyed watching at the rodeo, was the recycling people going to each trash can with their little sticks and pulling out the cans and putting it, and I just think that it was walking the walk, you know, and I think that's really good. I'm not reaching in the garbage can, and even though they had their little ones, it was really good to watch that they were walking the walk and not just thinking that, oh, you know, we're a recycling committee, we're, you know, out there. We're actually out there doing the work, and I just wanted to applaud them and thank them for that. So that's it.
Thank you. Trustee Youngland.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Trustee Hazelton.
Two brief items, Mayor. First is that Visit Estes Park's July board meeting is this Thursday at 2 p.m. online, so anyone can hop on and listen in. We will have a couple of bigger ticket items that I believe will go into executive session for, so fair warning to folks, those are not open to the public, but one is for negotiations with our interim CEO for his contract, and the other is to wrap the personnel investigation that's been ongoing for a number of weeks. I believe we're nearing the end of that. The board will, in open session, also discuss the permanent CEO search, so I know that's of high interest to a lot of folks, including this board. And my second item is just to note that we do have a trustee talk this Thursday, 10 a.m. in this room. It'll be myself and Mayor Hall. Please come, share your thoughts, ask your questions. It's just a really nice informal time to gather and hear what's on your mind. So again, that's Thursday at 10 a.m. in this room.
And also thank you, Trustee Youngland, for the correction on the Placer AI. I learned something a little bit more about the VEP cell tracking software, so thanks very much. Trustee Brown.
I have only one thing to say. Wear your sunscreen so you don't have to look like this. Anyway, I keep telling people that you should see the other guy. Not a scratch on him. So anyway, that's all I got.
I'll forego any other comments. We have a couple agenda topics where we may open up and discuss a few things that have been brought up. But we'll get to that. I'll move to the town administrator report, which includes, I think, the policy governance monitoring report.
Yes, Mayor, it's a July policy governance monitoring time. This is policies 3.2, 3.12, and 3.13. And I'm pleased to report compliance in all of those areas. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. That's all I have this evening.
No questions. In that case, we'll move on to the consent agenda. You guys gave me a mouthful today. I will read the consent agenda in full. Item 1, expenditure approval list bills. Item 2, the town board meeting and study session minutes dated July 8th, 2025. Item 3, planning commission appointment of Julie Ferris to complete the term of Jeff Robbins, expiring March 31st, 2026. Estes, item 4, Estes Park Board of Adjustment appointment of Colin Godsey for a 3-year term expiring March 31st, 2028. Item 5, Resolution 2925, amendment to an agreement with AE2S LLC to add general services for the Spruce Knob and Carriage Hills Water Systems Improvement Project, $219,930 budgeted. Item 6, Resolution 7525, intergovernmental agreement with Colorado Department of Transportation for fiscal year 2020, State of Colorado, Senate Bill 267, grant funding to redesign the Visitor Center parking lot, CDOT-PO 491003941. That's $136,845 budgeted. And finally, item 7, acceptance of town administrator policy governance monitoring report. Does any member of the public, including the trustees, request to have an item removed from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll take a motion.
Mayor, I'd ask for the removal from consent of number 5, Resolution 2925.
All right, we will move item 5, was it? Yeah, okay, we'll remove that for separate discussion. Any other removal items? In that case, I'll take a motion.
I'll move for the approval of the consent agenda with the removal of item number 5.
I'd second the motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Sinek made the motion to approve the consent agenda with item 5 removed. Trustee Eigel seconded the motion. We can vote. The consent agenda is, there you go. Okay, the modified consent agenda has been approved. We'll now turn our attention to item 5, Resolution 2925, amendment to the agreement with AE2 LLC to add general services for Spruce Knob and Carriage Hills Water Systems. And Jackie Wesley, you might talk to us first and introduce that.
Sure. We have a contract with AE2S for the design of the Carriage Hills portion. They've completed the design, and the next phase is to move into construction. 2 weeks ago, y'all voted on and approved an amendment to the overall budget, which includes this amount of money for the construction phase services. Construction phase services is where we get the design engineer to help us if a contractor has a question or something is unclear. They'll say, hey, we have a RFI, it's called Request for Information. We need more information about how to do this particular area of construction. In this case, we also asked them to include all the paperwork that goes with the DOLA grant and with the SRF funding. There's a lot of paperwork with the grant and loan pieces to help us with doing that and complying with the requirements of the submitting of that information each month. And then to review the pay applications from the contractor to verify what we observe in the field and what they're asking to be paid for align, and that they're in compliance again with the funding mechanisms.
Trustee Eigel.
So I have questions about it, and I just want to have a little more clarity about when we have something go through the consent agenda, it catches my attention over a certain dollar amount. And I understand that we have allocated funds for these, or they're a part of the plan, but that it's coming to us for approval raises the question, and any member can answer this, but why are we approving an additional $200,000 on this project? Was it not already included? Was it not part of the original plan? That was the difference in contractors that we talked at such length just a couple of weeks ago. So the amount does stand out, and I will admit that this project is going to have my full attention, and if there's something that stands out or is different than what we might expect, I will ask you the questions about it.
Sure.
Because I think this is a high-profile, very important project for the community. why was this $200,000, why are we being asked this extra question on this amount?
Sure, I can help with that. So when we did the design, we established the different schedules because we weren't sure how much funding we were going to get and how bids were going to come in and how much of the project we would be able to do. So the consulting engineer had a good defined definition of what they were going to design, but they didn't know what the contractor was going to build. So now that we have opened the bids and we know exactly what the contractor is going to build, they can estimate their level of effort to help us support us during that construction. Until we actually knew what the contractor was going to build, they could not estimate their level of effort.
So there wasn't a provision in the contract for the supervision part of this? I see them as a supervisor in this project.
Yeah, it took it through bidding only, bidding phase services, and then said we would amend the contract if your work is acceptable, and we go to the board and get board approval for construction phase services, which is not uncommon how we've done it before, but we can certainly talk about different ways to do that. But until they knew what they were building, the contractor was building, they could not estimate what their level of effort was. Now they do. They can estimate their level
Yeah,
of
and
effort.
I
and provide
understand that. I
information.
think it opens up the conversation, though, when we talk about a project and how much it will cost. Well, what are the other things that we're going to add on later? Is that a low bidder? Or as we've seen in other projects recently, the low bidder is not, maybe there are change orders and there are add-ons. And so low bidder may not mean what we think it means because there are things like this that come up that add to the cost of a project.
Yeah, it's a professional services contract. We selected on quals, not on cost for the services for AE2S, so it wasn't a bid project, it was a quals-based selection from them. So there is not a low bidder in this case, it is the professional engineering services contract, not the,
In my low bidder comment was with regard to an entire project.
Sure.
Not perhaps this project, but any project in the future. Does the low bidder mean that that's going to be the price going forward? Or we're going to have continuing conversations about how that price is going to go up, and maybe that wasn't
sure.
the total price?
Hardly ever is the price they bid the final price. There are changes in quantities, there are unknown field conditions, especially with pipeline work. You dig a hole, you don't know what's
can
under there.
imagine, yeah.
Yeah, so in my years of doing engineering consulting and watching oversight of construction, I don't think we've ever finished one exactly the way it was bid, because there are unknowns in construction.
Are those unknowns generally covered by a contingency?
They
or-
can be. Sometimes they're outside of the contingency, like the rock.
Right.
You know, that was a
right.
lot of rock that we
spent
did
that
not
money.
expect. So we try to do contingencies for it. We don't normally in this level for the general services contract because we knew we were going to negotiate and work with them on the size of the project once we knew what the bid was. So, contingency covers smaller things, but it's not a $200,000 contingency for general services. That is something we negotiated after. we
In
knew
the
how big
future,
project was.
can we ask the question when we talk about the project, do you anticipate other costs? Is that something you could reasonably answer, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
And estimate what that would be? Okay. With that, I'm prepared to make a motion unless there are any other questions. I propose, or I would move that we approve Resolution 2925.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Eigel moved to approve item 5 from the, that was removed from the consent agenda, Resolution 2925. Mayor Pro Tem Sinak seconded. We can take a vote. Thank you, Jackie, for the clarification and the questions, Trustee Eigel. We're going to move on to reports and discussion items, outside entities. I guess I didn't announce that the motion passed 7-0, so there you go. Now you have it in the official record. Another very noble service, Via Mobility Services, will give us a base funding report.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Bitzer. I am the Director of Operations at Via Mobility Services. First off, I want to say thank you for the town of Estes for always supporting us. Been over 30 years, a long, long time. For those of you that may not know, we are a private nonprofit that provide transportation here to the public. A lot of our riders are 60 and over and have disabilities, but it is open to everybody. Free of charge. There is no cost for that service. And we provide service Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30. We are fortunate enough to have a member of Estes Park, a resident that is our driver, which is always really nice. And just here to say thank you for the consideration for helping us for one more year.
Well, thanks for what you do tremendously. Since I fall into the older demographic, I appreciate having those options, but I recognize that you cover any demographic too. Other questions or comments, trustees? Seeing none, we'll thank you for your continued
Thank you.
service, and I expect the relationship to continue.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Right. Thank you. We'll move on to the first action item that we have, Ordinance 1425. It's a longish title. Acting by and through its water activity enterprise, authorizing the execution and delivery of a First Amendment to Construction Loan Agreement and Note, Series 2022A, and other documents related thereto in connection with rebuilding and improving the water distribution system of the former Prospect Mountain Water Company and declaring an emergency? Is that how it's supposed to read at the end?
Mayor, that's the way, and the long title as well, that's the way our bond council puts together ordinances. It's formulaic, but it contains all the necessary information. It does declare an emergency in the sense required to pass it as an emergency ordinance. We are not declaring a disaster or
Yeah.
a local emergency or anything like
Right.
that. An emergency ordinance requires 3/4 of the town board to pass. So 6 out of the 7 of you would need to vote for it in order for it to pass. And it can take effect immediately, which, will, as you will hear, will be necessary in order to continue the financing on this without a gap.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. This will be a public hearing. At this hearing, the Board of Trustees shall consider the information presented during the public hearing from the town staff, public comment, and written comments received on the item. Any member of the board may ask questions at any stage of the public hearing, which may be responded to at that time. This public hearing is open. And Tammy, you may give us your staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. I'm here today to request the approval of the emergency ordinance, and thank you, Town Attorney Dan, for explaining what emergency is regarding this ordinance. Ordinance number 14-25, which would authorize the extension of our CoBank Construction Loan Note Series 2022A. This supports the Prospect Mountain Reconstruction project. And so, as you might recall, this project was originally financed through a combination of sources, which includes $4.7 million from CoBank, and with the expectation that upon substantial construction completion, we would refinance it through the United States Department of Agriculture Rural Development Direct Loan Program. Unfortunately, due to some internal staffing transitions at the USDA, we have a timeline that's been stalled out a little bit. We have been unable to finalize the USDA funding. Our utilities and our finance teams are continuously working to close some of these deals with the USDA at both the regional and the national level in order to move this project forward. However, to avoid any kind of risk of default, we are requesting that we extend the CoBank construction loan maturity from August 1st to February 1st of 2026. And CoBank has agreed to this loan extension under the same variable interest rate terms and with no penalty for early repayment. So this extension will give the USDA the necessary time to complete their review and allow us to refinance into the lower interest rate program with USDA. And we do have some good news. Late yesterday, the USDA did sign the parity certificate for the Carriage Hills Spruce Knob loan. So we are having some momentum forward. While this delay will result in additional interest costs to the property owners, Under this co-bank construction loan, the interest cost will be evaluated with all of the project expenses at the completion of the project. And the loan extension would protect the town's creditworthiness and maintain the momentum for the project completion. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before I open for questions to the trustees, any person will be given the opportunity from the public to address the board concerning this item. Do I have anyone who wants to make a public comment on this topic at this hearing? Seeing none, trustees, what questions and comments do you have for this loan extension, basically? Trustee Igo.
Mayor, I have a couple. Thank you for addressing this. How long have you been aware of this, and has there been any public input or any information given to the people who will be affected financially by this?
As far as being aware of the delays with the USDA,
It sounds urgent that we deal with this tonight, so I'm guessing something has happened recently. This has just popped up.
so we originally did have a closing scheduled on April 1st, and we got word from the USDA in March with all the transitions with their staff that they would have to take it to the national level. They didn't have a program director. So we kept getting reassurances that it was coming, it would be reviewed. We kept getting more requests for more information to provide. And the reason that it's an emergency is because we have to provide 30 days notice, and we don't have that amount of time. So we kept hoping that we would have this resolved by now, but there has been significant dragging out of this process.
I have heard about some of those delays in the federal government. Do you know what the cost impact will be of this on how many property owners are affected, and what do you think the total cost will be?
Total property owners, I may need to drag up Jackie for
Or how
this
many?
one.
Yeah, how many taxpayers will be
137
impacted?
property owners.
37?
137.
137. Okay. Do you know what the total dollar amount is that you said it will be the interest will be absorbed by those? Because we just approved a contingency of $500,000 that they will absorb. So there will be some impact.
I can only say that we are paying a variable interest rate with this construction loan, and it ranges anywhere from 5.5% to 6.6%. It's on a daily rate basis. So around $20,000 a month in just interest cost. I know they have budgeted some of the interest with the total project, but until we complete and we see if we have any kind of savings from the construction side of things, I can't predict a figure that we're going to pass on
But
to
there may
the
be some
property
impact
owners.
on those property owners with this decision. If we
Correct.
do not approve this tonight, what's the impact of that?
Well, we're default in the loan, and we had discussed using some cash reserves, so we don't have to default on the loan. It does affect some of our credit worthiness. So as we're going out for future projects, it's not a great look.
Okay. Thank you for those good answers.
Just one comment, and I'm sure y'all are doing as much as you can. I have had comments from property owners in the different water projects that one of their issues is they don't feel like they've been, maybe because we don't know the answers, but they feel like they've been communicated enough with about what they're going to be responsible for money-wise and about what timing that is. And I can understand that. You know, if all of a sudden somebody coming to me, you know, you have $10,000 or $20,000 bill, whatever, it's very difficult to have to budget that, especially, I mean, anytime, but especially in a short period of time. So I'm assuming that we're making sure that any communications we put out, like more than we think we need, because people aren't feeling like they're getting the communications. So it's probably more to Jackie than anything else. And that's just what I've heard, whether they're not, yeah, but maybe we could put some more out. So, all right, thanks.
Good comments.
Other questions or comments? Town Clerk, has there been any other communications which have been received in regard to this item which are not in the board packet?
Nothing additional, Mayor.
Board of Trustees, any other questions? All reports, statements, exhibits, and written communications presented will be accepted as part of the record. This public hearing is closed. I will ask for a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 14-25.
Second.
Trustee Hazelton moved to approve. Trustee Youngland seconded. We can now go to a vote. And the motion passes. Thank you, Director Zimmerman.
Thank you.
We'll move to action item 2. Thank you. Resolution 7625, sunsetting the Transportation Advisory Board. I would first ask if there is any staff report in regard to this.
Mayor, very brief report. As you all will recall, at your last meeting on July 8th, you discussed and indicated an interest in considering sunsetting the Transportation Advisory Board. Your discussion at that meeting confirmed our ongoing commitment to addressing transportation issues and acknowledged the talent and dedication of TAB members, both present and in the past. There was a wide-ranging conversation about potential future ways to engage with residents of the Estes Valley regarding transportation issues, as among other special interest issues that we will continue to address and discuss as we move forward. But the item in front of you tonight is Resolution 7625, which would formally sunset the Transportation Advisory Board. It's worth noting that we have a number of other policies that, including your governing policies, that pertain to how advisory boards work, that are also modified by having the Transportation Advisory Board in there. So we'll have to bring you back policies for cleanup, including Policy 102 that discusses the number of, or discusses all of the advisory boards that you have, as well as those sunsetting dates. So we'll bring that forward to you all at a later time. We would anticipate in the meantime, missing the Transportation Advisory Board, that any citizen input on transportation would come directly to the town board. And that's it for my report. Happy to answer any questions for me if you have them.
Does any member of the public request to speak on this item before the trustees begin discussion? Is that a yes? That was sort of half an arm there.
I didn't quite know what to say. My name's John Guppy, and I live at 561 Chapin Lane. And transportation is something that I'm constantly following and riding my bike among and wending my way across town. And as I reviewed some of the reading and material that came out of where we're at with the TAB as an advisory board, but also a link between citizens such as myself and the trustees and the mayor. And I will miss having that opportunity. I did attend a few meetings and I feel like that board will be missed, and it serves a purpose. And I'm concerned that it can be laid down so easily as with a vote and very little discussion in the community. So I respect the decision and hope that we will move on in a constructive manner that will include even more communication about transportation, which is a huge burden on our community. The millions of people that come here and the locals that live here, again, wend our way through roads that are dangerous. And they shouldn't be. They should be safe. We should travel freely on foot, on two wheels, on four wheels. But, you know, the resistance of saying this board is dysfunctional is coming from me. I'm saying it's not, and it should be reintroduced and kept running.
Thank you. Other comments on this topic? I could make a series of prefacing comments, which would be mostly similar to comments that I've made in the various discussions we've had with this board in regard to the chair of the TAB and the TAB overall, and various other components of it. However, I'll reserve my comments for a little bit later. I did get very, very involved with TAB during my tenure. Went to or listened to all of the meetings after they were recorded, or went to the other ones, so I was able to make a lot of my own judgments. I also had a high volume of interviews with every member of the TAB at the time, and sometimes with the chair and the liaison at the same time over the course of a couple months, and developed some other thoughts along that, but I will reserve my thoughts and open it to the trustees for discussion. Trustee Lancaster.
So just a couple thoughts on this, and I agree with Mr. Guffey. I think it's important that we have public input and public participation. I think this board is committed to that. And I think what we had talked about is going more of a focus group model with other communities are doing as well, rather than a standing committee. And I think it has some real advantages. I also want to say, first of all, no one on this board is saying I think that the TAB was dysfunctional. I think it's did a lot of great things for this, and I really appreciate the time and people spent on that committee. I think we're looking at a way to get even more input from people. I think rather than a standing committee, the focus group model will allow us to form specific groups for specific projects. I think it'll give more people opportunity to participate. I think there's some people don't want to participate or can't participate because they can't commit to a term to be on a standing committee, but they would commit to maybe being on a focus committee and a series of meetings on a particular project. It also gives us the opportunity to target that group to the people who are most effective. And that doesn't mean other people will be excluded. But if we're doing something in the reclamation neighborhood or Carriage Hills or downtown, maybe people are very interested in those projects, but may not be interested in sitting in a meeting and talking about something, out in the reserve or somewhere else. They're interested in the project that affects them. This gives them that opportunity and can be very specific to the potentially affected interests there as well. I think it gives us more flexibility. It opens it up for more public participation, and which is what we want to do. And this is not something against the TAB, but I think if you're on it long enough, you start becoming like staff. You start learning the stuff, you know the jargon, you know what's going on, and it makes it harder for you to see what the average person coming in off the street, the person who works at Safeway and has a problem and comes in with something, hasn't talked transportation for 2 years and doesn't do the jargon. And by bringing new people in, I think it's a good challenge to staff to explain things in a way that the general public can understand, get the feelings of what people's concerns are, not from a group that's been educated on transportation issues for several years in some cases. So I think it gives us more opportunity for public comment, fixes some things that I think we could do better. This is not something that's broken. We've all heard that thing, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, if it ain't broke, let's make it better. And I think that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to support this for those reasons.
Thank you, Trustee Youngland.
I always hate to follow Frank. He hit on so many of the points that I feel. I think it will expand the community's engagement because of those facts that he said. Some people don't have the commitment. Maybe some people don't have the expertise in one thing that we're looking at the current time, but they may have a great expertise in something else that comes up. So I look at it as just kind of readjusting our thinking and thinking outside of the box with how we move forward. I agree. It's not that TAB has done a poor job, that they're dysfunctional or any of that. This has been talked about back when the past mayor, the past trustee Marchank was on with me. He had talked extensively about, maybe reducing the amount of meetings because they didn't really need to have as many at the current time. So I think it's staff time could be put to better use when there isn't a subject or something of very importance, as well as trustee and our volunteer time. So I'm in favor of moving a different direction with TAB. I'm actually excited for what the possibilities could be.
Thank you, Trustee Brown.
So I just want to mention a couple things. One is the timing of this. There's I think, a belief in the community that this is directly related to what happened with the termination of the chair. And I really don't think it is. It happened to come up at that time. But remember, we just adopted 2 really extensive transportation plans, a multimodal plan. I don't know what they're called, but they're 2 of them. And I know one was like 200 pages, one was 120. We've spent a lot of time developing and refining that. And it just seems to me like it's the time to figure out, how to handle these things going forward and not have a permanent committee. We have no permanent committees other than, I think, the audit committee of the town board. It's the only one I know of. So this is a little bit of an outlier to have the TAB board like that. It also raises some questions that it's kind of beyond the scope of this motion, but we've talked about the issue of term limits. There were no term limits on the Transportation Advisory Board. We appoint members to various other organizations, some of which have term limits, some don't. So Visit Estes Park, I think, has term limits, doesn't it? Yes? The Housing Authority does not. And it just seems that if I think that's something we're going to want to look at overall with this as we decide what happens next with both transportation, the stormwater. There's all kinds of other issues that could benefit from a focus group type approach. So I'm going to support this motion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sinek.
My comments can be pretty short. I think the Transportation Advisory Board did great things. And they advise this board, which is their job. We have advisory boards for different things. And when we were going through a lot of the transportation changes in town, they were a big part of that. One of the reasons I think to sunset at this point is that I do think that to have the different focus groups, I think that was a great point about if you have something in the reclamation neighborhood, you have people in the reclamation neighborhood talking about it. So I think that's a really good point. The other thing is that one thing that concerned me a little bit when I was watching the meetings was that I would hear that they got emails from the public. I never heard about those emails. And the advisory board weren't the people that were making those decisions. It's this board. And so I think in some ways it was almost a disconnect from this board. So we weren't getting some of the input that I would like to have. And maybe that was just my thought. Maybe that's not the whole board's thought, but that was my thought, that sometimes they would get input from the public that we wouldn't. And that's not really the point of it. So I just think at this point, even though they've done a great job, they really have, I think I would be supporting sunsetting it at this point. But I do think to have the focus groups in the different areas where things are really affected, and maybe if we have another project that affects the entire town, to do an ad hoc committee made up of the people all over town. But I think the different areas is a great point that you made.
Thank you, Trustee Hazel.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think we had a really functioning Transportation Advisory Board for a number of years, many of which were under the leadership of the former chair. And I think whether you agreed with TAB's recommendations or not, they were an active functioning group. Sometimes I didn't agree with their recommendations, but that didn't mean that I thought that they were, dysfunctional or that they were being disingenuous to what they felt like they were representing in terms of the community. I thought that they were, and it's proven that they've been functioning for a number of years, even if you didn't agree with them. And that's my perception. What I do think there's been is a change in the past couple of years, and that did concern me. It felt like the shift in the tone and the combativeness did change. But I want to make sure that this action isn't perceived as being punitive to Transportation Advisory Board. In my opinion, it's ensuring that we continue to have effective community input going forward. And that's really my primary concern. I'm not sure Transportation Advisory Board, as it stands after everything that's gone on over the past few months, I'm not convinced that we could have that effective input the way we've had for a number of years moving forward. It's pretty rocky. And I think there are a number of other points that support the idea of sunsetting it that I think are actually really valuable, a lot of which Frank brought up and some other folks have mentioned tonight. So one thing I do want to mention that a constituent shared with me after our last discussion of this, which I thought was a really great point, is us thinking about how these additional kind of layers and work for staff and the board might look, and defining a process and a timeline for these task forces. I think that we might need to anticipate what it looks like for staff to work and train new focus groups, how we're going to pick these folks, what kind of layers of potentially bureaucracy we might be adding, moving things forward. That doesn't mean that I don't think focus groups are a good idea. I just think we as a board need to think about making sure that staff doesn't get bogged down with that, because it's already a challenge when we have new, planning commission interviews or things like that, getting schedules on. So if we're talking about, task forces for significant projects, I think we just need to consider that impact on staff. So I'm supportive of sunsetting TAB tonight. I think it's time. I think especially for us to be able to move forward in a way that doesn't feel like it's still carrying some of the things that came from the past. I do think that the other thing we need to consider as a board is how liaison roles might work for task force like this moving forward, how we define those and how we hold any liaisons accountable. We've talked about maybe that whole task force being reporting to the full board or two folks, and I don't think we've ever come to a conclusion on that, but I think that's going to be, I've just heard it come up from this board a few times as we've discussed this. So I want to make sure we're thinking about that too, and not, we're not just talking about sunsetting TAB, we're talking about sunsetting TAB and pairing it with this idea of new task forces, and I want to make sure that we're considering all those different layers as we move forward.
Trustee Agel.
Thanks, Mayor. I feel like I have a unique perspective to this board in that I attended every meeting and I did all the extra time and I had the perspective. And it does feel like it was this personal thing over the last several months. But I can bring to you the perspective that I've had over the last several years, and I have seen grand contributions by members of the community, and I have seen issues in that board that have not been addressed until I was willing to step into the conversation. And as you witnessed tonight, there are some folks that really don't like that I would stand up to represent what I felt like was a true representation of the situation. And that's what I've done. That's what I've endeavored to do. And I want to publicly report to the trustees that some of the statements that were made this evening in public comments, if you missed those, they're interesting, but they are not entirely rooted in fact. And while I'm not here to defend myself in this moment, there were some pretty significant character statements that were made about me. And I think that may impact my ability to represent this community, people who elected me, people who look to me for representation on this board. So I will respond to those in good time when I can bring more information to the conversation. I think that's a long-term commitment to the community. So having addressed that, I think that we are letting go a group of people who are willing to, same comments as the last time we talked about this, be engaged, listen, participate in the conversation. And so many times our challenge is getting public input. Mr. Guffey is good, and he is insightful and thoughtful on the big picture. His words tonight about TAB made me think again about what are we doing here. So TAB has changed over the last couple of years, the membership, the conversation has changed. And I have watched that happen with each board that comes into this community. The conversation changes with elections. The conversation changes with the times, with projects. So I would expect that that conversation will always change. And so that actually is hopeful to me that the conversation changes in some kind of a cycle and it's not always the same. Now, Frank nailed it for me when he said, this is an opportunity to maintain the average person's view. When you're part of something for a while, it becomes comfortable, you understand it better. And I've had a couple of people say to me, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget us downtown. Don't forget your neighborhood. And the more meetings I attend, the more comfortable and I feel like, well, I have a lot of information. I go to all the meetings. I will never say to a constituent, I know better than you do. Because if I forget that position, then I'm doing a disservice. And so what you said there, Frank, was really important, that a different model of getting community feedback, perspective, and advice through an advisory committee or panel is critical to us making good decisions. And Mayor Hall, you said something else that was a deal breaker for me on this model of taking public input, and that was the interception of public input. There are people who have sent letters to TAB that did not get to this board. They weren't, the information wasn't forwarded, it wasn't summarized, it was part of a conversation at a different level that this board never heard about. And I think that that's a failure of an advisory board, and that is concerning to me. So I will support this, although I want to recognize that the people that are willing to participate in a board are golden treasure. And so I know a lot of those folks were looking forward to a long-term with TAB, and I don't want to overlook and recognizing that willingness to do that. So I would support this, but it's only for the opportunity to get better citizen input.
Thank you. Yes, we will at a future discussion item. We'll talk about the broader issue and we'll form that accordingly in regard to forums, ad hoc, if this measure passes. And so whatever structure that takes. This is the last of the advisory boards. I think there used to be 3 or 4 that have been dissolved over time as their purpose moved in various directions. We're not here to re-legislate the decision that we made regarding the board chair from a few weeks ago. We're here to talk about the TAB itself. I'll make a couple comments regarding a lot of the commentary that has flowed around this. I absolutely agree with Mrs. Melissa Wood in regard to private conversations have to have the same high ethics as public commentary. And I strive to do that in every private conversation that I have. When I had private conversations with every member of the TAB board at that time, and with the chair, and with the liaison, individually and together, in every case, I strove to maintain the highest ethics. I do agree with Trustee Eigel that there's some mischaracterization of what was said in those. Those were private meetings. I told folks that it was confidential. They could share their thoughts. What I heard was a highly polarized situation. No one came to me before the discussion on paid parking, which was kind of the catalyst that set this tinderbox off, although the tinderbox was present for a long time. No one came to me, but then I asked everybody to come to me and talk and tell me and give me the insight, and I listened to every one of them. It was a highly polarized committee at that point with a couple different constellation points. I even suggested when we, a couple months ago, were discussing the first motion from Trustee Eigel, well, before it was a motion even, to remove the chair, I suggested the possibility of removing the liaison and the chair. And yet, I feel that the operations of that committee, it would have been very difficult. It would be very difficult to move forward. So there are other comments there. I do not feel that there has been unethical behavior in regard to this. I do feel that the original comment that set this off, when Trustee Eigel made the inference that perhaps TAB was not in support of paid parking because there wasn't a letter for it, when he made that comment, well, that wasn't a well-balanced comment because it could go either way. And if you recall, as we all do here, how the voting went and how some of the commentary went, we decided that with or without that letter from TAB, the board was going to make its decision, and it made the decision to support paid parking with, I think, a 6-1 majority. So that particular comment that ignited this firestorm, well, so be it, it's in the past. At this point, I have no other comments. Trustee Eigel was fully in his rights as an elected trustee to bring to the board the action that he asked about. The board said, yes, bring it for discussion. After discussion, the board said, yes, bring it to an action item. And we voted 5-2 on that prior motion. So everything has been handled according to policy. I know how it feels to certain people, and I also apologized a couple months ago for the manner in which we handled that midnight meeting with Chair Morris. That's on me. We could have managed that meeting better. I'm repeating myself, but I'm repeating myself because a lot of the public commentary has not heard me the first time, so there you go. With that said, is there any other discussion? Trustee Lancaster.
I would move approval of Resolution 7625 to formally sunset the Transportation Board, but I also would like to add, with the expression of appreciation, thanks, and respect of the board for all the current and past members of the TAB.
Good.
Second.
Trustee Lancaster moved to accept the action. Trustee Hazelton to seconded. We can take a vote. 7-0, the tab is sunsetted. We'll
Mayor.
move on. Our next, yes,
Before we continue,
Trustee
just-
McCulloch, yeah.
Assuming that the board would be okay with me adding focus group format scoping
Yes.
to a future study session?
Please do, yes.
Thank you.
Our next item is executive session, so we will be preparing the room for executive session. This is to discuss purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest, Section 24-6402-4A CRS, and for a conference with an attorney for the board for the purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions. Section 24-6402-4B CRS, potential locations and real property transaction, alternatives for relocation of the police department. I need a motion to go into executive session.
I'll move to go into an executive session.
And a second.
I'd second the motion.
Mayor Pro Tem Sinak moved to go into executive session. Trustee Eigel seconded it. We will prepare the room and move into executive session. Oh, let's take a vote. Yeah. All right, we'll move forward as the room is prepared.